Hi, I'm Kent Mayor Dana Ralph. I'm here today with our Chief of Police, Rafael Padilla. We are going to talk about federal immigration policy and the impacts or lack of impacts on our residents here in the city of Kent. I want to start with a very unequivocal statement. For decades, as a city, as a police department, we have served all of our residents without regard to immigration status. That is not something that here at the City of Kent we do. We believe in serving all of our residents. With the federal executive orders that have been issued in the last week, I know that there is a lot of fear, information, and quite honestly, misinformation out there. And we felt together that it was really important to take some time to have a conversation with our community and reassure you that it is business as usual here in the City of Kent. Our commitment is to continue to serve all of our residents. Immigration status is not an impact on what we do and the services that we provide and that the police department provides. Chief, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about Kent Police Department specifically.
You know, Mayor, I appreciate the opportunity, particularly for us to share our stance on this. I think you said it very well. Your immigration status in the City of Kent is not our concern. And we don't take enforcement action on it. Our mission is going to remain true. We're here to serve and protect all community members, and that includes our undocumented immigrants. And so business as usual as far as we're concerned. And then we have good reason for that. But we'll get through our policies, we'll get through the law, because I think that should be some reassurance to people. But we also want to make sure that no one is afraid to call 911. Because of their immigration status, and particularly if they're victims. We want you to call, keep calling, and we'll explain why we have measures in place to ensure that there's no issues there. Covering the law is not always fun, sometimes boring, dry language, but state law really dictates what law enforcement officers can and can't do. And there are strict prohibitions, which we will read through, which I think would also reinsure what we're doing. At the same time, you know, state law does afford support in certain circumstances to remove violent criminals from our communities, and we'll talk through that as well. And then last, you know, our stance has never changed. We are very mindful that we serve a very diverse community, one of the most diverse in the country. We take great pleasure, joy, and honor in serving them, and so nothing is going to change in terms of what we do for them.
I don't know how many times we need to say that, but I think it's important. We are here as a city, as a police department, to serve every single resident of this community.
Yes.
All right, should we go into the law? I do think it's really important, again, in this time of significant misinformation, getting back to what the law says, I think is really important. And Washington State has done a really good job of laying this out. As boring as some of that language might be, I do think it's extremely important for people to know.
Sure, and we'll go through that. I do want to note for our listening audience that these are excerpts from the law, not the entire law. It would take a lot longer, but these are the pertinent points I think that most of our community wants to hear. So Revised Code of Washington 1093-160, and these are the highlights of that law. But the pertinent points we think the community wants to hear. First, it says that immigration enforcement is not the primary purpose of state law and local law enforcement. Officers may not inquire into or collect information about an individual's immigration or citizenship status or place of birth. They may not provide information pursuant to notification requests from the federal immigration authorities for the purposes of civil immigration. What that says there is basically we can't act as a proxy for the federal government to do these type of inquiries as to status. State and local government agencies may not provide non-publicly available personal information about an individual, including individuals subject to the community custody pursuant to RCW 994A 701 and 994A 702 to federal immigration authorities in a non-criminal matter except as required by state or federal law. And so to break that section down there, what it says is we can't proactively identify someone in our community and send that information over to federal immigration authorities and so that they can clue in on people in our community. We are not allowed to do that. We haven't been doing that. We're not going to do that. State and local enforcement agencies may not give federal immigration authorities access to interview individuals about a non-criminal matter while they are in custody, except as required by state or federal law or a court order. So basically, even people in our custody, we are still not providing or sharing information outside of what's required and outside of what is publicly accessible. People may not realize this, but at all of our correctional facilities in the state, it is public information to know who is in custody and for what at the time. So anyone, including federal immigration authorities, can access that, but we will not be proactively providing it to them. The law also says that an individual may not be detained solely for the purposes of determining immigration status. So this applies to traffic stops, maybe welfare checks. We inadvertently go to a park, for instance, and just have a conversation. Our officers are prohibited from even having a conversation about immigration status. And it's important to note, as that is the excerpts from the law, KPD policy follows state law, and it's been in place now for several years.
All right, thank you, Chief, for that explanation of the law. Let's get into some questions, things that I know that we are hearing from community members, and really discuss how KPD responds in particular situations. So I think the very first one we want to talk about is, what will Kent Police do differently regarding a person's immigration status now that these executive orders exist?
So we've hit on this, but I don't think we can hit it enough. Basically, nothing will change. Our stance, our laws, our policies are all intact and remain the same. There are very few exceptions to the rule involving violent criminal offenders, but for the most part, business will be as usual. I think it's important to note that we have not had an arrest for immigration status in several years. I feel comfortable saying in at least 8 years, this has not even been an issue for Kent Police. So I want to emphasize that for our community.
Next question. Will the Kent Police Department assist federal law enforcement in arresting undocumented immigrants?
So here's where the nuance and why I think it's important to have this discussion comes in. So for the most part, the federal immigration authorities will act independently as they are authorized by federal law. And we won't have ongoing, say like task force set up or plan operations proactively involving people in our community. So that's the overlying thing there. But there will be instances where the federal immigration authorities will want to come in and remove violent criminals. Some of these are people that involve trafficking organizations, human trafficking, drug trafficking, criminal organizations. We'll go through that. But if they come here and they have a criminal matter, a serious criminal matter, usually they come with a warrant signed by a federal judge. We will assist them in those regards. So we'll talk about more what our role will be, but it's my job to do what I can to protect the community, and that includes removing violent criminals, and that policy has not changed.
I think that's the most important piece of that. It is the role of the Kent Police Department, the City of Kent, to keep our entire community safe. And that's what we're talking about here is again, safety for every single one of our residents, regardless of documentation status.
Correct. I think it's also important to note that for decades, we have had strong partnerships with our federal law enforcement agencies, and that's important to you in our community. Those partnerships and our joint operations over the years have taken down some thousands of violent criminals in our community. We're talking drug cartels, like I mentioned, human trafficking organizations, organized crime syndicates, fraud syndicates that do scams and do financial damage, sexual violence people, drug and gang organizations from other countries. These are really bad actors. And again, our role is to help remove those people from our communities and make them safe. So we're going to continue to do that.
Let's take that theme of working with federal law enforcement just one step further. Does the federal government have the authority to force local police departments, like Kent Police Department, to conduct immigration enforcement, straight up finding people?
Great question. And prior to the president's order, I was a solid no. They don't have the authority. And so with the new order, I did double check with our city attorney, Tammy White. And under her guidance, she is consistent in that they do not have the authority to make us take law enforcement action regarding immigration crimes.
Okay. And that policy is not changing here at Kent Police Department?
That is not changing.
Okay. So you did talk about instances where we will cooperate with the federal government. When you assist immigration enforcement or ICE or other federal law enforcement agencies, what will that look like?
Typically, it means that we will be a visible presence assisting them. So imagine that they've identified a person that they want to go contact and say that person's at a residence or an apartment here in Kent. One of the things that provides safety is recognizable authority. People in our community recognize this uniform, and many of the people in the community know our officers. So what we bring is a visible presence where people can clearly recognize that it's Kent Police is there and they're part of what's going on, which I hope will lend some trust and understanding. With that, the federal immigration authorities will do their operations and they'll conduct them the way they conduct them. I don't have authority to stop them. I want to make that clear. To obstruct them in any way is a crime, and I can be prosecuted for that. So I think people should know that. But basically, we're a presence. But what I'm really hoping to do is to strengthen our relationships with the federal immigration authorities so that they have the working cooperation to let us know ahead of time what's going on, and that we may consult with them, because we know our community best, on what is the safest way to go about what they're doing. That we have in place now currently. I want to make it even stronger so that we aren't causing undue harm or undue impact to the community when these operations occur, if they occur here in the city.
Yeah. Again, the consistent theme of making sure that we are keeping our entire community safe.
Yes.
Okay, so we've talked about the federal executive orders. We've talked about state law. Let's get down to right here at the Kent Police Department. How are you ensuring, how is the city ensuring that our officers are following the law and our Kent Police Department policy?
Yeah, good question. I think it's important to start that we have had a long-standing policy in the city of Kent that mirrors state law. So our original policy on this issue dates back to 2016, and it was modified again here in, I believe, 2018. State law was enacted and modified some things which we changed in our policy. So that's the first thing. We have strong policy and law. Second, all of our officers have received training on the policy and law to include scenario questions and answers. And because this has become an issue that's at the forefront right now, we are in the process of refreshing that training to make sure that everyone is up to date on what to do.
Nice. I am grateful for the level of training that our department receives, and that this is an important enough issue that we're taking that time.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. In the event that we have an officer that doesn't follow the policy or the law, what action would you take?
That falls in line with any other violation of our policy or law. And the consequences for that can be pretty substantial. It depends, of course, on the nature of what happened. But when it's said and done, officers can look at anything from reprimand all the way up to termination, depending on what occurs. Our process is we will take in the information, conduct an internal affairs investigation to determine the facts. Once we have the facts, then I look at that and I determine whether or not policy or law was violated. If policy or law is violated, I will enact discipline. And so that's the process. That process is set both in our city policy, our department policy, and with the union contract as well.
All right, Chief, I have two more questions for you, and they center around calling 911. The first one is, should people call 911 to report someone that they believe is undocumented?
Great question. You'll very rarely hear me say, don't call 911, but this is one of those instances where it would not be appropriate to do so. Going back to what the law says, we cannot act on that information. We are prohibited. Officers can't follow up, investigate. They're not supposed to do anything with that information. Two, we can't pass that information along to the federal immigration authorities. So in essence, while you could make that call and we will get that information, we won't be able to act upon it. So when considering how busy our 911 system is, what the priorities for that use is, we are asking that you not call and advise us of someone's immigration status.
All right, here is what I think the more important question about 911 is. Should someone residing in Kent that is a victim of a crime, documented or not documented, call 911?
Absolutely. We want you to call. I'll give you a scenario. If you are, say, a victim of domestic violence, and our officers arrive there and somehow, without asking, determine that you are here, undocumented immigrant here in our country, they cannot act upon that. Their job there is to help figure out what happened, provide services to the victim, arrest the offender if they're able to, and then we also bring into situations resources and help with that. So absolutely, there should be no reason to not call 911 or otherwise ask for law enforcement help. If you get stopped by a Kent police officer, that should not matter either. During a traffic stop or say whatever to and from business you have, you run across one of our officers, your status in our country is irrelevant. So have no fear. If you need our help, please call us.
Thank you. We are just about at the end of our time. Any closing words before we wrap up?
I get that this is a very heightened concern at this point. I want our community to know that we love the fact that we are incredibly diverse. We understand and appreciate the foundations of immigration in our country. And so that is in our hearts and our minds. We care for everyone in our community. At the same time, we have a job to do, and our job requires that we follow the law. So you can count on us to do, while keeping in mind the needs of our community, we will always be faithful to following what the law is.
Thank you, Chief. I want to say thank you for taking the time to watch this video and hear from both the Chief of Police and myself as your mayor. Want to just wrap up with, it is 100% our mission, our goal, and how we have always acted to take care of every resident of the city of Kent, regardless of immigration status, regardless of documentation. We are here to take care of our community and serve you. So hopefully this video helped settle some of that fear and really put out solid information that you can rely on.